I have been informed that I am doing YouTube wrong, and I wanted to make this hopefully short video to just let you know that I intend to continue doing that and try and get you all on board as to why. This channel is attempting to unpick the infinities of what is, as it says. We're trying to do metaphysical inquiries into the nature of reality. What is it to be? What is it for anything to be? It is a deep dive that I've been doing for many decades, but more focused over the last 10 years as I've been trying to write a book called The Infinite Now, which is what has inspired this channel. So first things first, I need you to know that the chapters that come out, the episodes that come out, are episodic. They follow their prior one because these are the chapters from the book. So a lot of the stuff that we will discuss assumes that you have already gone through the prior chapters. Now you don't have to. They often stand alone, and I'm glad that they do stand alone, but occasionally they will lean on the information that's been offered in those prior chapters. The other issue is that to do metaphysics properly, we need to take on all of the information that's available, and that requires nuance. That means we need to look into the scientific side of the story, as well as the philosophical side of the story, and perhaps even the theological side of the story, so that we can take all of these pieces of information and put them together. So to help you navigate that, what I have done is I've created a series of playlists. Act 1 is our deep dive into the nature of the physical universe, the physical world, and the physical self. Because as we dove into the nature of time and space, we very quickly realized that the observer is all important. So we need to understand what is the observer, because understanding the observer helps us to frame our questions as to what is space, what is time, what is matter, what is energy. And that's taking things from a materialistic point of view. The second act, and most of the focus of this year, has been what is the conscious observer. So it's moved from a physical system to what consciousness is. It started from the very materialist standpoint that a nervous system is important. We then looked into distributed nervous systems, things like jellyfish, sponges, that sort of thing, and really looked hard for the boundaries to any system, the absolute boundaries to a system, and that could be any sort of system, but here specifically consciousness. So when you see those more physics-based chapters pop up, if you're not interested, I understand, that's more than fair enough, but just know that they are there to help shape the greater metaphysical inquiry. For example, what we went into after that was that there was no boundary to these systems, and that perhaps nature should be more considered in terms of becomingness rather than being. That led on to a parallel in modern physics, which is the nature of waves and particles, and we did a deep dive into the history of light. The idea behind that was that we're still trying to unpick what is the language of nature. Is it a language of process, or is it a language of quanta? And why are we doing that? Because we want to know what is the boundary to the conscious system, because if boundaries don't exist, that's a new metaphysical truth that we must then incorporate into our greater narrative. And for those of you who are non-dualists, you'll start to see a hint of perhaps where we're going. But also why doing a 21st century inquiry that incorporates modern physics, that incorporates science into that investigation is all important. But the goal for me is to try and outlay a bridge between the modern materialist 21st century understanding and a metaphysical view which is perhaps a little bit more timeless. Not necessarily ancient, but just timeless. It's the questions that are important to us all and will remain important to us for as long as we are thinking, living beings. When I began this channel, I couldn't really produce visual content. It was not something that I practiced, so I had this new tool available to me, which was AI visual generation, and I used it to give something to support the story, and did some really quite beautiful work with that. There was a lot of, it wasn't just writing text prompts, there was a lot of post-production, a lot of editing, a lot of thinking, a lot of work that went into that. It wasn't any easier than doing it the way I do now. However, if that style bothers you, you can know that in Act 2, that's where the change occurs. That's where the pivot towards the more filmic style shifts. And if you want to listen to those earlier chapters but you're put off by the visuals, we've got a podcast which is identical. The audio is the exact same, the story is the exact same. You can just listen to it and then pick up the thread visually later if that's what you want. And in respect to that, just know that the very end of the story, as we get into those later chapters in Act 3, when we start to inquire into the absolute and infinity, they do get difficult. We will be dealing with some pretty weighty stuff. And though most of our channel chapters thus far have been quite fun and relaxing and entertaining, some of these later ones are going to be harder to understand, but I think more rewarding. Either way, I want to thank you all for participating. You've been wonderful. The comments in the comment section have been very uplifting. Much love. I will let you all go now, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. All right. Thanks again. Bye.